This can't be happening. Why? Why me?
Emma Thompson sat on the cold, cracked kitchen floor, staring at the letter her father had left. It smelled faintly of whiskey and desperation. "Marry him," it said. "Do it, or your mother's life is over." Her heart thundered. She had 22 years of independence, dreams, dignity, but it was slipping through her fingers like sand. And now she was about to meet a man who was supposed to be her savior, but looked nothing like the prince in her fantasies. The fluorescent light flickered overhead in their cramped Hackney flat. Through the paper-thin walls, she could hear her mother's labored breathing, the oxygen machine wheezing rhythmically, endlessly. £63,000 in medical debt. Another £9,000 monthly for treatments keeping Patricia Thompson alive. Emma's graphic design freelancing. It barely covered groceries. Or Richard Thompson had gambled away their future. Horses, poker, desperation. Now he'd found one final bet. Selling his daughter to Oliver Harrington, a reclusive billionaire from the Cotswolds. The offer was grotesque in its generosity. £250,000 up front, all medical expenses covered, monthly allowance. In exchange, Emma would marry a man she'd never met. A man rumoured to be elderly, disfigured, and utterly alone. The black Mercedes that collected Emma 2 days later felt like a hearse. The 3-hour drive from London transformed urban sprawl into rolling countryside. Hedgerows, stone cottages, endless green stretching toward grey skies. Harrington Manor emerged from morning mist like something from a Gothic novel. Jacobean architecture, manicured gardens, wealth that whispered rather than shouted. Mrs. Davies, the housekeeper, led Emma through marble halls lined with ancestral portraits. "Mr. Harrington is waiting in the drawing room, dear. Don't be frightened. His appearance can be, well, startling." Nothing prepared Emma for the reality. Oliver Harrington sat in a wingback chair, backlit by grey window light. He appeared ancient, perhaps 70, maybe 80, with liver-spotted hands trembling on an ivory-handled cane. His face was deeply lined, jowled, with roomy eyes that tracked her movement. He wore an expensive suit that hung oddly on his hunched frame. "Miss Thompson." His voice rasped like dried leaves. "Please, sit. We should discuss our arrangement." Emma's stomach churned. This was her future. This stranger, this elderly man who'd purchased her like property. "You're wondering if you've made a terrible mistake," Oliver said, surprising her with his directness. Emma met his gaze and found unexpected sharpness there, intelligence that didn't match his decrepit appearance. "I'm wondering if I had any choice at all." "There's always choice. You chose your mother's life over your freedom. That's not weakness, Miss Thompson. That's love." His words cracked something inside her. Tears threatened, but she blinked them back furiously. She wouldn't give him, or her father, or this impossible situation, the satisfaction of breaking her. "The wedding is in 1 week," Oliver continued gently. "You'll have your own quarters, your own life. I ask only for companionship occasionally, public appearances when necessary, nothing untoward." Emma nodded, throat too tight for words. She was already mourning the future she'd never have, the love story, the partnership of equals, the choice. But her mother would live. And somehow that had to be enough. That evening, Emma descended the sweeping staircase in her only decent dress, a borrowed navy frock that felt inadequate against the manor's grandeur. The dining room could seat 30. Tonight it was set intimately for 2. Candlelight casting long shadows across Oliver's weathered face. "You don't have to do this every night," Emma said quietly, taking her seat. "Pretend this is normal." "What's normal?" Oliver's mouth quirked, almost a smile. "I've found that peculiar arrangements often make the most sense. Tell me, what do you actually enjoy?" "Your father's dossier mentioned graphic design, but facts aren't truth." The question caught her off guard. When had anyone last asked what she enjoyed? "I used to paint, watercolours. Before everything fell apart, I'd spend Sundays in Victoria Park, capturing light on the canal." "Used to. Art's a luxury." "Survival isn't." Oliver nodded slowly, something like understanding flickering in those sharp eyes. Perhaps that could change. The estate has a conservatory, excellent natural light. Consider it yours. Emma stared. This wasn't the transaction she'd expected. Why would you do that? Because a cage is still a cage, even gilded. If you're trapped here, you might as well have windows. After dinner, Oliver offered to show her the gardens. He moved slowly, leaning heavily on his cane, but insisted on the tour. The evening air smelled of honeysuckle and approaching rain. Mind the, Oliver started, but Emma had already stepped on the loose flagstone. She stumbled, he reached to steady her, and they collided awkwardly. His cane clattered away. For a moment, they were tangled together, and Emma felt unexpected warmth beneath the expensive wool of his jacket. "Good Lord, I'm a rubbish knight in shining armor," Oliver muttered. Emma laughed, a real surprised sound she hadn't made in months. "And I'm a disaster of a damsel." They disentangled, both slightly breathless, Oliver's eyes crinkled with genuine amusement. "Well, at least we're equally incompetent. There's partnership in that." Rain began spattering, unsudden and cold. They hurried back inside, Emma steadying Oliver's elbow, both laughing at the absurdity, at themselves, at this ridiculous situation. In that moment, he felt less like a stranger, more like someone human. Emma couldn't sleep. At midnight, she wandered downstairs and found Oliver in the library, surrounded by leather-bound books and amber lamplight. "Can't settle?" he asked, gesturing to the chair opposite. She curled into it, tucking her feet beneath her. "This is all so strange. Yesterday I was eating beans on toast in Hackney. Tonight I'm in a manor with more rooms than my entire tower block. And married to a gargoyle." I didn't say that. You didn't have to." Oliver's voice was gentle, lacking bitterness. "I know what I am, Emma. What life has made me. I don't expect affection, but I'd hoped for honesty. Can we manage that? No pretense between these walls?" Emma studied him, this mysterious man who'd saved her mother, imprisoned her future, and somehow made her laugh. "Honesty? All right, I'm terrified. Grateful, angry, guilty, sometimes all at once. That's the most honest thing anyone's said to me in years." Oliver's smile was sad and somehow kind. "Thank you." Something shifted between them. Not attraction, not yet, but the first fragile thread of connection. 3 days before the wedding, Emma found Oliver in the conservatory he'd promised her. He stood before an easel, her easel, she realized, set up with fresh canvases and professional watercolor supplies worth, God, hundreds of pounds. "You didn't have to," she started, then stopped. Oliver was bent over, adjusting the easel's height, and his collar had shifted. Beneath the hairline, Emma glimpsed something wrong. The edge of what looked like latex. Prosthetic material. He straightened quickly, but their eyes met. Caught. "Emma." His voice had changed, dropped 40 years, smoother, younger, vibrant. She stepped back, heart racing. "What is this? What are you?" Oliver's trembling hands, suddenly not trembling at all, rose to his face. He hesitated, then made a decision. Slowly, deliberately. He began peeling away the aged skin. Latex and makeup came away in pieces, revealing the truth beneath. The man who emerged was perhaps 35, devastatingly handsome, with sharp grey eyes and strong features. Not elderly, not disfigured. A complete calculated fiction. Emma's world tilted. "Oh my God, who are you?" "My name is Oliver Harrington." "That part's true." He stood before her, no longer hunched, no longer old, just a tall, fit man watching her with apprehension. "Everything else." "I'm sorry, I needed to know." "Know what?" Emma's voice shook with rage and confusion. "Whether I'd prostitute myself for money. Congratulations, you've got your answer." "No. Whether anyone could see past the surface. Past wealth, appearance, status." Oliver ran a hand through dark hair, now freed from its grey wig. "I've been hunted my entire adult life. Every woman who approached me wanted the Harrington fortune, the estate, the title. No one wanted me. So I disappeared, became a monster, to find someone real. By lying? By manipulating a desperate woman?" Tears streamed down Emma's face. "I sold my future for my mother's life. And you were You were playing dress up? The money's real. The medical care's real. Your mother's treatment continues regardless. I'm not taking that back. Oliver's voice cracked. But yes, I was testing you, and you passed every test. You showed kindness to someone you thought hideous, compassion where others would show revulsion. Emma walked to the conservatory windows, looking out at manicured gardens, trying to process the betrayal and revelation simultaneously. Behind her, Oliver waited in silence. How much was real? She finally asked. The conversations, the laughter, my respect for you, that was all real. He approached cautiously, stopping several feet away. I know I've destroyed any chance of your trust. But the wedding, you can still choose. Marry me, knowing the truth, or walk away. Either way, your mother's care is guaranteed. I'll put it in writing. Emma turned, studying this stranger who was somehow the same man she'd begun to trust. Handsome now, yes, but the sharp intelligence in his eyes remained. The kindness, the loneliness. You're still a manipulative bastard, she said quietly. Oh, yes. And I should walk away. Probably. But my mother lives either way. I swear it. Emma's mind raced. The betrayal stung, but beneath the anger, she recognized something else. In his deception, Oliver had revealed himself more honestly than most people did in years. He was wounded, guarded, desperate for connection, just like her. 3 days until the wedding, she said. You have 3 days to convince me the real you is worth marrying. Oliver's expression flickered with hope and fear. I'll spend every moment trying. As Emma left the conservatory, her heart thundered with fury, fascination, and the terrifying possibility that this disaster might, just might, become something real. The call came on a Tuesday morning, grey, drizzling, the kind of London weather that felt like a warning. Oliver was in his study reviewing contracts when his private line rang. He answered, and immediately wished he hadn't. Mr. Harrington. Richard Thompson's voice was slick with false warmth, the kind that coated poison like honey. I think it's time we had a proper conversation, man to man. Oliver's jaw tightened. Mr. Thompson, my daughter's settled in nicely, I hear. Lovely estate you've got there. A pause, deliberate, calculated. Be a shame if the press found out about your little disguise situation, the prosthetics, the fake identity, manipulating a vulnerable young woman. I reckon that's worth, £500,000, maybe more, depending on which papers I call first. Oliver said nothing for a long moment, and outside his window, rain streaked the London skyline like grey tears. I see, he said finally, his voice dangerously calm, and if I refuse? Richard laughed, a hollow, ugly sound. Then tomorrow's headlines write themselves, don't they? The line went dead. Oliver sat very still, staring at the phone in his hand. Then, quietly, deliberately, he set it down and reached for his private security team. Emma knew something was wrong before Oliver even spoke. She'd learned to read his silences, the way his shoulders set differently when he was troubled, the slight tension around his eyes. They were sitting in the conservatory, her half-finished watercolor between them, when he told her everything. She felt the color drain from her face. My father, she whispered. Of course it's my father. Emma? No, don't. She stood abruptly, wrapping her arms around herself. This is my fault. He's using me against you. Everything I touch, I destroy. Her voice cracked on the last word. Oliver crossed the room in 3 strides, standing before her, close but not touching. Look at me. His voice was firm, gentle. This is Richard Thompson's greed, not your doing. Not even remotely. He's my father, and you are not him. Oliver's grey eyes held hers steadily. You never were. The tears came then, hot and furious and exhausted. Emma didn't stop them. She was so tired, so unbearably tired of holding everything together alone. By afternoon, they were in Oliver's London office, 40 floors above the city, floor-to-ceiling glass framing the Thames like a painting. His security team, led by the sharp-eyed Marcus Webb, spread documents across the conference table. Richard Thompson has a history, Marcus said, sliding a folder toward Oliver. Gambling debts across 6 boroughs, 3 county court judgments, one previous blackmail attempt. A business associate, settled quietly in 2019. He glanced at Emma. He's done this before. Emma stared at the file, at the evidence of her father's whole rotten history, laid out in black and white. He's desperate, she said quietly. That makes him more dangerous, not less. Agreed, Oliver said. Which is why we move first. We control the narrative, before he does. He looked at Marcus. Then begin monitoring his communications. Nothing illegal, just watchful, and get our legal team to draft an injunction. Marcus nodded, gathering his files. As the team filtered out, Emma remained staring at the London skyline, the city sprawling endlessly below. Somewhere out there, her father was plotting, calculating, treating his own daughter like a chess piece. What if the press finds out anyway? She asked quietly. Oliver came to stand beside her at the window. Then we tell our story first, and we tell it better. 3 days after Richard's call, Emma appeared in Oliver's study with her coat already on. Jaw set, eyes fierce with determination that he recognized immediately as trouble. I'm going to see him, she said. No preamble, no apology. Oliver looked up slowly from his desk. Absolutely not. He's my father, Oliver. I can talk to him, make him understand. He doesn't want understanding, Emma. He wants money. Oliver stood, his voice careful but firm. Richard Thompson is not a man who responds to reason. He responds to leverage, and right now, you walking through his door would only give him more of it. So what, I just hide here? Let him control us from a distance. You let us handle it strategically. There's a difference between courage and recklessness. Emma's eyes flashed. Don't patronize me. I've been handling Richard Thompson my entire life, long before you came along with your disguises and your chess games. The words landed like a slap. Oliver absorbed them quietly. You're right, he said. You have, and I'm sorry, genuinely, for adding to the complexity of your life. He moved around the desk, stopping before her. But please, trust me on this. Just a little longer. The fight drained from her slowly, reluctantly. I hate feeling powerless, she admitted. I know, so do I. The planning sessions grew longer, more intense. Oliver's legal team worked through evenings while Emma sat in on meetings she'd never have imagined a month ago, discussing injunctions, media strategy, financial counter-moves with sharp-suited lawyers who spoke in paragraphs. She surprised them, started asking questions that cut straight to the heart of issues. Noticed details the team had missed. Oliver watched her from across the conference table, something quietly proud shifting in his expression. She's good, Marcus murmured to him during a break. Where's she been hiding? Hackney, Oliver said simply, keeping herself small to survive. One evening, reviewing documents side by side, their hands brushed, reaching for the same file. Neither moved away immediately. The contact lasted only seconds, but it registered, electric and undeniable, in the charged silence between them. Emma cleared her throat. Oliver turned a page unnecessarily, neither mentioned it. But something had changed, irrevocably. The planning sessions grew longer, more intense. Oliver's legal team worked through evenings while Emma sat in on meetings she'd never have imagined a month ago, discussing injunctions, media strategy, financial counter-moves with sharp-suited lawyers who spoke in paragraphs. She surprised them, started asking questions that cut straight to the heart of issues. Noticed details the team had missed. Oliver watched her from across the conference table, something quietly proud shifting in his expression. She's good, Marcus murmured to him during a break. Where's she been hiding? Hackney, Oliver said simply, keeping herself small to survive. One evening, reviewing documents side by side, their hands brushed, reaching for the same file. Neither moved away immediately. The contact lasted only seconds, but it registered, electric and undeniable, in the charged silence between them. Emma cleared her throat. Oliver turned a page unnecessarily, neither mentioned it. But something had changed, irrevocably. Marcus Webb placed the surveillance report on Oliver's desk the following Friday morning without ceremony or softening. You need to see this. Oliver opened the folder. Photographs, long lens, slightly grainy but unmistakably clear. Richard Thompson, entering a Mayfair restaurant. sitting across from a man in a charcoal suit, leaning forward with the conspiratorial intimacy of shared secrets. The man in the charcoal suit was Charles Harrington. Oliver stared at the photograph for a very long time. The blood drained slowly from his face. Not with shock exactly, but with something worse. Recognition. The slow, sickening recognition of a betrayal you'd subconsciously been expecting, but desperately hoping wouldn't come. "How long?" Oliver asked quietly. "At least 6 weeks," Marcus said. "Possibly longer. Charles has been feeding Richard information, your schedule, security arrangements, the details of the disguise." A pause. "He knew everything, Oliver. He helped design the blackmail." Charles, his cousin. The man who'd sat at family Christmases, who'd shaken his hand at his grandfather's funeral, who'd smiled at him across boardroom tables for 36 years. Oliver closed the folder carefully. "Where's Emma?" "Conservatory." "Don't tell her yet." "Not until I've—" He stopped, reconsidered. "No, she deserves to know." "Bring her in." Emma's face cycled through emotions rapidly. Shock, anger, then something that looked disturbingly like fear. Charles knew about the disguise from the beginning. "He helped orchestrate Richard's approach," Marcus confirmed. "We believe he identified your father as a potential asset, someone desperate enough to make trouble." "But why?" Emma turned to Oliver. "Why would your own family—" "Because he wants control of Harrington Industries." Oliver's voice was flat, stripped of everything except bare truth. "If I'm publicly disgraced, manipulative billionaire deceives desperate young woman, the board removes me. Charles steps in as the responsible alternative. He gets the company, gets the estate, gets everything my grandfather left to me." Emma sank into the nearest chair. The room felt suddenly very small, the walls leaning inward. She thought of Charles, how she'd met him briefly at a dinner last week. His smooth charm, his careful attention. She'd thought him kind. "I should have known," she said almost to herself. "Everyone in this world is playing an angle." "Not everyone." Oliver's voice was quiet. "Emma? Not everyone?" Their eyes met across the room. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him, but trust felt increasingly like something that happened to other people. Charles arrived at the London office that afternoon, summoned by Oliver with no explanation given. He entered wearing his confidence like expensive cologne, all smooth smiles and extended hand. Oliver didn't take it. The smile faltered almost imperceptibly. "Cousin, you wanted to see me?" Oliver slid the surveillance photographs across the desk without a word. Charles glanced down. The smile died completely. For a moment, just one unguarded moment, something genuine crossed his face, not guilt exactly, not remorse, just calculation recalibrating furiously. "This isn't what it—" "Don't." Oliver's voice was dangerously quiet. "I've known you 36 years, Charles. I know every version of your excuses." Emma stood in the corner, arms folded, watching. She said nothing, but her presence was a statement in itself. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't intimidated. And Charles, glancing at her, seemed to register that with something approaching unease. "You brought a desperate woman into this," Oliver continued, "used her dying mother as a crowbar. That's—" He shook his head slowly. "I could forgive ambition, Charles. I can't forgive cruelty." Charles straightened, his mask snapping back into place. "You can't prove intent. Any lawyer will tell you." "I have 6 weeks of communications," Marcus said from the doorway, holding up a tablet. The silence that followed was enormous and satisfying. Emma watched Charles Harrington's careful, constructed world begin to unravel, thread by thread, in real time. She felt no triumph, only the exhausted recognition that in this world, danger wore the most familiar faces, and that whatever was building between her and Oliver would need to survive not just external enemies, but the question of whether trust, once fractured this many times, could ever truly hold. Oliver called the meeting at 7 in the morning, early enough that London was still rubbing sleep from its eyes, the Thames catching pale winter light outside the office windows. His core team assembled. Marcus, the legal counsel, the PR director Vivian Cole, and Emma. Vivian spread a strategy document across the table. Charles and Richard are moving faster than we anticipated. Our source at the Daily Telegraph confirms they've pitched the story. Billionaire's Cruel Deception: How Oliver Harrington Manipulated a Desperate Young Woman. They're planning to run it by Friday. Today was Tuesday. Oliver stood at the window, back to the room, hands clasped behind him. The silence stretched long enough that people exchanged glances. Then he turned. "We hold a press conference tomorrow morning." The room erupted, and Vivian started talking about preparation timelines. Legal counsel cited risks. Marcus simply raised an eyebrow. Only Emma said nothing, watching Oliver with careful eyes. "We don't hide," Oliver continued, his voice cutting cleanly through the noise. "We don't deny. We walk out there together, and we tell our story before Richard Thompson sells his version to the highest bidder." He looked at Emma directly. "But only if you agree. This is your story too, your choice entirely." Emma held his gaze. The room waited. "Let's do it," she said quietly. "I'm done being someone else's narrative." The preparation consumed the rest of Tuesday entirely. Vivian coached them on camera positioning, anticipated questions, key messages. Legal counsel briefed them on what could and couldn't be disclosed, given ongoing proceedings against Charles. But it was the quieter moments that mattered most. Late afternoon, Emma and Oliver sat alone in the conference room, the city dimming outside. Vivian had left them with a list of likely questions, brutal ones, designed to destabilize. "Did you feel exploited, Miss Thompson? Mr. Harrington, isn't this simply a wealthy man buying a wife? Was any part of this relationship genuine?" Emma read them aloud, her voice steady but her hands not quite. "That last one," Oliver said quietly. "The answer, if you're willing, is yes. Genuinely yes. Every conversation, every laugh. Every moment in that library at midnight." He paused. "But you answer however feels true to you." She looked up from the paper. Something in his expression, unguarded, almost frightened, made her chest ache. "It was real for me too," she said softly. "That's what terrifies me most." By 9 o'clock that evening, the press had gathered outside. Photographers, television vans, journalists clutching coffee cups and camera equipment. Word had leaked, as word always did. Tomorrow's conference was already tomorrow's story. Emma stood backstage, in a corridor behind the main conference room, peering through a narrow window at the assembled media. There were so many of them. Dozens of faces waiting to judge her, define her, reduce her to a headline. First time facing a press pack? Oliver appeared beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. First time doing anything like this? Her voice was barely a whisper. "They'll ask hard questions. Some will be deliberately unkind." He turned to face her. "But here's what I know about you, Emma Thompson. You've faced harder things than journalists. And you've sat with a dying mother and made impossible choices. You've walked into a stranger's estate with your chin up and your dignity intact." His jaw tightened with something fierce and protective. "They don't get to break what your whole life couldn't." Emma exhaled slowly. Outside, camera flashes sparked like lightning through the window glass. Tomorrow, everything changes. The morning arrived grey and relentless. The kind of London morning that offers no comfort, just clarity. Emma stood in the small anteroom adjacent to the conference space, staring at her reflection in a portable mirror, while Vivian made final adjustments to her appearance. She barely recognized herself. Not because of the careful styling, though that was jarring enough, but because of something in her eyes. A steadiness that hadn't been there 6 weeks ago. A woman who'd been through fire and was still, somehow, standing. Her phone buzzed. A message from her mother, Patricia, texting from the private medical facility in Surrey, where her breathing had improved dramatically over the past month. "Saw the news vans on the television, love. Go show them who you are. I already know. And I couldn't be prouder. Mum X." Emma's eyes filled. She blinked furiously, unwilling to ruin Vivian's careful work. Oliver appeared in the doorway, immaculate in a charcoal suit, but his eyes tracking straight to her with an attention that had nothing to do with strategy. "All right?" Not even slightly. She managed a small, real smile. "Let's go anyway." He extended his hand, not performative, not staged, just offered. Emma looked at it for one breath, two, then took it. They walked out together into an eruption of light. Camera flashes fired in rapid succession. A strobe of white that Emma had to consciously walk through rather than flinch from. The room held perhaps 60 journalists, microphones bristling from the central table like a porcupine, voices immediately overlapping in competitive urgency. Vivian's voice cut through. One at a time, please. They didn't listen. They never did. Mr. Harrington, was this entire relationship a fabrication? Miss Thompson, do you feel you were exploited? Oliver, can you confirm reports that your cousin Charles is facing criminal charges? Oliver leaned toward the microphone, unhurried. Thank you all for coming. We have a statement, and then we'll take questions properly. He glanced at Emma, the smallest nod of reassurance. She leaned forward. 60 pairs of eyes fixed on her. She thought of her mother's text, of the cracked kitchen floor in Hackney, of every impossible moment that had brought her to this room. My name is Emma Thompson, she said, her voice clear and steady. And I'd like to tell you the truth, all of it, if you'll let me. The room quieted, just slightly, but enough. Emma spoke for 4 minutes without interruption, a small miracle in itself. She described her mother's illness, her father's desperation, the impossible choice she'd faced. She described arriving at Harrington Manor expecting a monster and finding something far more complicated and human. Was I deceived? Yes. Did Oliver's disguise represent a manipulation? Absolutely, and he knows that, and he's owned it privately in ways I won't detail here. She paused. But here's what the story your sources sold you doesn't include. The man beneath the disguise is someone who has spent years being hunted for his wealth rather than valued for himself. His deception was wrong, but it came from a wound, not cruelty. There's a difference. Silence, genuine silence, the kind that meant she'd landed somewhere true. You came here expecting a scandal, Emma continued, a vulnerable woman exploited by a rich, powerful man, and I understand why. That story is real, it happens, it matters, but it's not my story. She straightened slightly. My story is messier and stranger, and honestly, it's mine. You don't get to write it for me. A journalist near the back, older, female, with sharp eyes that suggested she'd seen everything, raised her hand. Miss Thompson, do you love him? The room held its breath. Emma glanced at Oliver beside her. He was watching her with an expression so unguarded, so completely stripped of performance, that her heart turned over quietly in her chest. I'm working on it, she said, and that's more honest than most love stories get. Spring arrived at Harrington Manor like a promise kept after a very long winter. Cherry blossoms frothing white along the garden paths, the old rose beds coming tentatively into colour, the Cotswolds air smelling of fresh earth and possibility. The wedding was nothing like the contractual arrangement 6 weeks prior. Small, deliberately intimate, 40 guests in white-painted chairs arranged on the south lawn, the manor's honeystone facade glowing behind them in afternoon sun. No press, no performance, just people who genuinely wished them well. Patricia Thompson sat in the front row, oxygen tank discreetly beside her chair, but her colour better than Emma had seen in years. She wore the blue dress Emma had always loved on her, and when Emma appeared at the top of the garden path, Patricia's hand flew to her mouth. Emma walked alone. She'd chosen that. No father to give her away. She was not a gift. She was not a transaction. She was a woman walking toward a choice she was making freely, with full knowledge of every complicated, imperfect, extraordinary truth. The guests turned. Oliver turned. He looked at her the way people look at things they never expected to have, with a kind of careful reverence, as if the moment might shatter if he breathed too suddenly. Emma kept walking, steady, certain. They'd written their own. Another decision made quietly over tea in the library one late evening. Vivian's suggested traditional script set aside without ceremony. Oliver spoke first, his voice lower than usual, stripped of its customary control. Emma, I spent years building walls and calling it wisdom. I disguised myself from the world because I was convinced that honesty made you a target. He paused, jaw working. And then you walked into my drawing room, terrified, furious, principled to your absolute core. and you were the most honest thing I'd encountered in a decade. You didn't pretend the situation wasn't monstrous. You didn't perform gratitude you didn't feel. You were just true, and you made me want to be the same. His voice roughened. I promise you, no more disguises. She not ever again. Emma exhaled a breath she felt she'd been holding for weeks. I came here expecting the worst, she began, a small, real laugh from the guests. I got something I don't have adequate words for yet. You are infuriating, Oliver Harrington. Complicated. Occasionally impossible. Another ripple of laughter. Her voice quieted. But you saw me. When I'd spent years making myself invisible, you looked directly at me and saw something worth this. She gestured between them, at the garden, at the impossible, beautiful reality of it all. I promise to keep being honest with you, even when it's uncomfortable, especially then. The registrar smiled. I think those will do rather nicely. They'd written their own. Another decision made quietly over tea in the library one late evening. Vivian's suggested traditional script set aside without ceremony. Oliver spoke first, his voice lower than usual, stripped of its customary control. Emma, I spent years building walls and calling it wisdom. I disguised myself from the world because I was convinced that honesty made you a target. He paused, jaw working. And then you walked into my drawing room, terrified, furious, principled to your absolute core, and you were the most honest thing I'd encountered in a decade. You didn't pretend the situation wasn't monstrous. You didn't perform gratitude you didn't feel. You were just true, and you made me want to be the same. His voice roughened. I promise you, no more disguises. She not ever again. Emma exhaled a breath she felt she'd been holding for weeks. I came here expecting the worst, she began, a small, real laugh from the guests. I got something I don't have adequate words for yet. You are infuriating, Oliver Harrington. Complicated. Occasionally impossible. Another ripple of laughter. Her voice quieted. But you saw me. When I'd spent years making myself invisible, you looked directly at me and saw something worth this. She gestured between them, at the garden, at the impossible, beautiful reality of it all. I promise to keep being honest with you, even when it's uncomfortable, especially then. The registrar smiled. I think those will do rather nicely. The celebration that followed was warm and uncomplicated, in the way that only truly earned joy can be. Champagne on the lawn, Patricia laughing properly for the first time in months, Marcus Webb surprisingly revealed as an enthusiastic dancer, Vivian crying behind enormous sunglasses while insisting she wasn't. Richard Thompson was not present. He was currently cooperating with police regarding fraud and blackmail charges. A process that Marcus's team had initiated swiftly and thoroughly following the press conference. His cooperation had been strongly encouraged by the weight of evidence against him. Charles Harrington had been removed from the Harrington Industries Board by unanimous vote 3 days after his role with Richard was formally documented. He'd contested it, briefly and expensively, and lost. And he was somewhere in the south of France now, licking wounds Oliver had ensured were financial rather than personal. He was family, after all, just family at a very great distance. As evening settled over the garden, Oliver found Emma standing alone by the lake, shoes off, toes in the cool grass. Regretting it yet? He asked, coming to stand beside her. She considered him with mock seriousness. Give me a week. He laughed, genuinely, fully, a sound she'd come to love. Then he took her hand, and they stood together watching the last of the light die beautifully over the Cotswolds hills. Simple, quiet, real. The studio occupied the entire ground floor of their London townhouse, north-facing windows flooding the space with the cool, honest light that Emma had always described as perfect for seeing colour truly. Her name was on the door, Thompson Harrington Creative Studio. Below it, smaller but no less proudly displayed, founding member, Hackney Creative Arts Bursary. She was on the phone when Oliver appeared in the doorway, loosening his tie after the commute from the city. He waited, watching her, animated, confident, gesturing with the particular expressiveness that came out when she was deep in a project she loved. No, the brief needs to be completely rethought. The color palette is saying something the client hasn't consciously decided yet. So let's have that conversation before we design anything else. Can you book them for Thursday? She paused, listening, then smiled. Perfect. See you tomorrow, Jade. She hung up, turning to find him watching. You're doing the proud face, she said. I have a proud face. You absolutely have a proud face. She crossed the room, straightening his loosened tie. Board meeting go well. Exceptionally. Charles's replacement is working out rather brilliantly. Oliver's hand settled at her waist, and your mother called. She wants Sunday lunch here. She's been attempting to teach herself to make a proper roast. Emma laughed. God help us all. At 2 a.m, the townhouse was quiet except for the soft sounds of a sleeping city and the small, contented breathing from the nursery down the hall. Emma stood in the doorway, watching the rise and fall of their daughter's chest. 8 months old, improbably small, with Oliver's grey eyes and Emma's dark curls and an opinion about absolutely everything, expressed at considerable volume. They'd named her Rose. After nothing in particular, only because when Emma had said it aloud in the hospital, Oliver had looked at the tiny, furious face in his arms and said, yes, exactly that. She heard Oliver's footsteps. Careful, quiet, the particular tiptoe he'd developed with touching speed. He appeared behind her, resting his chin gently on her shoulder, both of them watching Rose sleep. She had a whole conversation with the dog today, Emma whispered. Very serious, lots of pointing. And what did the dog contribute? Moral support, mostly. They stood there in the small hours, in the warm dark, in the unremarkable, extraordinary miracle of a life built from something that had begun with desperation and deception and an ugly old man in a wingback chair. Oliver pressed a kiss to Emma's temple, quiet, unhurried. She leaned back into him. Rose breathed on, small and oblivious and perfect. Sunday mornings had become sacred, not in any formal sense, but in the way that certain hours accumulate meaning without being asked to. Patricia Thompson sat at the kitchen table, attempting her roast with the concentrated determination of someone who viewed cooking as a personal opponent. Oliver, who was, quietly and somewhat embarrassingly, an excellent cook, offered occasional suggestions with the diplomatic care of a man who valued peace. Emma sketched at the far end of the table, Rose in a high chair beside her methodically destroying a piece of toast. The scene was ordinary, unremarkably, extraordinarily ordinary. Emma looked up from her sketch pad at some point, looking at nothing in particular, just looking, and found herself thinking about the cracked kitchen floor in Hackney, the letter that smelled of whiskey, the black Mercedes that had felt like a hearse, the ancient man in the wing-back chair whose eyes had been far too sharp, far too alive. What she'd learned, what all of it had carved into her with patient, painful precision, was this. Appearances are the stories we tell from fear. The disguise Oliver had worn was wrong, but it had been born from the very human terror of being seen only as a surface, only as a sum, never as a soul. And Emma, who had made herself invisible for years beneath the weight of survival, understood that terror more than she'd ever admitted. Love, real love, was not the absence of deception or pain or impossible circumstances. It was what two people chose to build in the aftermath of all those things. It was showing up, honest and imperfect, and saying, I see you, the real you, and I'm staying. Oliver caught her eye across the kitchen. That quiet, private smile, the one she'd first seen beneath prosthetics and pretense, the one that had told her, before she had language for it, that something real was happening. She smiled back. Rose threw her toast at the dog. Patricia announced the roast was nearly probably done. Oliver started laughing, and Emma Thompson, who had once sat on a cold kitchen floor reading a letter that smelled of desperation, believing her story was over before it had truly begun, picked up her pencil, turned to a fresh page, and kept drawing. The greatest deceptions are not the ones others perform upon us, but the limitations we perform upon ourselves. True love begins the moment we stop pretending and dare to be exactly, terrifyingly, beautifully real.